Deconstructing Introductions. The Hook or Prelude. This video is part 1 of the Deconstructing Introduction series, a series intended to train you in the art of crafting the 7 elements of an introduction for research writing. The hook or prelude, that is the opening of your introduction, has everything to do with your role as a researcher and the identity of your audience. Inexperienced researchers think of themselves simply as entertainers, believing that the hook should simply be eye-catching, luring readers to keep reading the essay. However, few readers appreciate a bait and switch where the hook draws them in and then the rest of the essay pivots topics or plummets into dry, unmotivating writing. Your role as a researcher is not simply to entertain, but rather to persuade readers that you have found some new or interesting information, or have found a solution to some relevant problem, or have found an answer or new perspective on an important question. When writing a hook, always ask yourself, what am I trying to accomplish in this essay? Writers often ask themselves this question when writing every other part of the essay, treating the hook as an exception, as a necessary frill to draw readers in before plunging into their real argumentative purpose. However, it is imperative that you treat the hook as an integral element not only of your introduction, but also of your entire argument. Inexperienced researchers often make faulty assumptions about their audience. Typically, developing researchers err by assuming the readers to be ignorant, providing a lurching prelude to what is merely common knowledge or at least a common question or issue in the field. Occasionally, more experienced researchers get caught up in their specialization and assume their readers know way more of the minutiae than they actually do, and as a result, they fail to introduce their topic or motivate their readers. Whether you assume too much or too little about your audience, the proper corrective is to get to know your audience. So, get to know your audience by dialoguing with a few representative readers, sharing your ideas or excerpts of your draft with friends, colleagues, or professors. The point is to find a sample audience as close to your target audience as possible. Based on your interactions with this sample audience, you will likely have a better grasp of how to craft a hook for your target audience. Get to know them by reading other related articles or skimming perspective journals. How do other researchers craft their hooks? Which ones stand out and why? Good exemplars help us refine our ideas and figure out our readers' expectations. Also, get to know your audience by thinking about what got you interested in your topic in the first place. Don't distance yourself from your readers by only thinking from the perspective of the writer. Good researchers think like readers and remember what first hooked them about their argument or topic. When writing a hook, always ask yourself, what are my readers' needs, and how familiar or interested are they in my topic, question, or problem? If you can answer this question, you can make informed choices about your hook. Remember, the hook or prelude has everything to do with your role as a researcher and the identity of your audience. Since your goal is to persuade readers, and since these readers are people that you have now come to know, the hook should not only prepare readers for your argument, but also set the stage for a problem that is relevant to your readers and is solved by your essay. Hooks aren't a way for researchers to dupe audiences into reading something they would not have otherwise read, but rather a way for researchers to care for and shape their audience by focusing them on the topic at hand and motivating them to be interested through the relevance, accessibility, or intrigue of the topic. Note that the hook often bleeds seamlessly into the shared context or rhetorical situation, the next element of an introduction, because both the hook and the shared context focus on motivating readers. It should be no surprise then that good hooks are often closely tied to the research problem, especially since the hook is one way writers motivate readers. So how might a research writer craft an effective hook? Writers often want a formula for crafting hooks. However, writers should let each new rhetorical situation, each new essay, lead them to craft hooks unique to every new audience or project. Although a formula can't be prescribed, there are a couple helpful ways of thinking about hooks that not only limit a writer's possible options, but also free the writer up to be creative. The first option is to think of a hook in terms of a problem and a vehicle. The hook should prime the reader to consider a problem, thus limiting your range of options for the hook to material related to your research problem, a problem that is relevant to your readers and is solved by your essay. Since you know that your hook will be tethered to a specific problem, you then have to figure out the vehicle. That is, how you are going to convey the problem to the reader and transport the reader into your argument. The vehicle could be statistics, anecdotes, etc. So think in terms of the problem at stake and the vehicle for connecting readers to the problem. So if I were researching education reform in seminaries and was addressing the problem of declining spiritual formation, then my hook would need to somehow connect me to the problem of spiritual decline. As I consider vehicles, I could talk about recent statistics concerning the decline of evangelism among seminary students, or I could narrate a few brief anecdotes of how some recent seminary graduates have been instigators in church splits, have committed adultery with church members, or have demonstrated racial prejudice. Hooks like these would not only focus readers in on the problem, but also grab their attention and imagination in pursuit of a solution, the very task I would be setting out to accomplish. The goal with this option would be to help readers realize how painful life will be until the problem is solved. As another example, if you were researching how a particular people group views Christianity, and you wanted to address the problem or lack of Christian evangelization among this people group, then you might choose a vehicle like Anecdotes of Violence Against Christian Missionaries in the Region to expose the obstacles to mission work there and the fears that keep many Christians silent about their faith. Thus, this first option calls the writer to rehearse the problem in real-life anecdotes that illustrate how painful life will be until the problem is solved. Another option is to think of your hook as a disruption of something known with something unknown. It is a common move in rhetoric to transition from the known to the unknown, from what is familiar to your audience to what is unfamiliar. With this in mind, one effective way of crafting a hook is to begin your essay with something the readers already assume or think they understand, and then to introduce a surprising or complicating insight previously unknown to the readers. For instance, you might begin your essay like this. It is a commonplace to regard the Puritans as a dour, somber, and miserable lot. After all, writers like H.L. Mencken have described Puritanism as the haunting fear that someone, somewhere, may be happy. Indeed, the term puritanical has become synonymous with a legalistic lifestyle of all work and no play that avoids leisure or pleasure. However, the Puritans' own writing attests that they had a vibrant leisure life with many recreational pursuits. What you have done here is offer the readers something they think they already understand, only to surprise them with a complicating problem or misunderstanding. This disruption of the familiar with something unfamiliar helps writers introduce their topic and argument by connecting it to something the readers already assume, and it helps them set the stage for the problem or misunderstanding that their argument attempts to solve. These two options offer writers two helpful frameworks for generating a hook. Having considered these principles, questions, and frameworks, here are a few final comments on common strategies for crafting a hook. Writers typically use one of these four approaches to begin their introduction. First, quotations. Writers can either integrate the quotation into the flow of the paragraph or set it apart for added emphasis in the form of an epigraph. An integrated quotation includes both an explanatory comment and a quotation which is connected to what follows. Here's an example. Although many think of progress as bursts of change, progress is a slow process, as the old Mexican proverb states, "Little by little one travels far." Daily, seemingly insignificant choices will result in noticeable change over time. This approach is one of the most common and can be effective when the integrated quotation is brief and is able to seamlessly throw you into the argument, the surrounding literature, or the problem. The downside is that this approach is so common that it is often overdone, making the introduction feel a bit cliché. Another quotation option is to use an epigraph. An epigraph is a quotation related to the topic or problem that the writer sets apart at the beginning of the essay, article, or chapter. Consider this example. "Not all those who wander are lost." J.R.R. Tolkien, The Fellowship of the Ring. Few quotations have been so often eisegeted as Tolkien's line from a poem about Aragorn. However, eisegesis is not only a problem in popular fiction, but also in biblical interpretation. Epigraphs are an effective approach if the quotation is brief, iconic, or too potent to be summarized. An epigraph often plays in the back of a reader's mind while she reads the essay, making epigraphs extremely effective at orienting readers to your topic. Epigraphs, however, are often regarded as informal or as fillers in academic settings, with many program handbooks and journal guidelines requesting that epigraphs be omitted. Second, anecdotes. Writers can represent a report That is, curate a narrative from another source that illustrates the topic or problem. Consider this example. Although deans at ATS divinity schools and seminaries identify spiritual formation as their chief objective, churches report recent seminary graduates. This approach effectively represents source material to grab the reader, making it a fine option when sources have already adequately documented examples that illustrate your problem. This approach is less common for writing in the sciences, which place great weight on personal empirical observation and reportage. A writer could also offer an original case study. Consider this example. 6 out of the 8 consultants surveyed reported secondary stress after their sessions in August 2020. The prevalence of tutor stress demands the consideration of administrators. This approach would be an example of the personal empirical observation or reportage common for writing in the sciences. A writer could also use a personal narrative as their anecdotal hook. Consider this example. Gender bias is a persistent issue in the automotive industry. While I apprenticed with a local mechanic, customers regularly requested male mechanics. It was only when I opened my own business that customers regarded me as a reliable alternative. Although this approach was often commonly regarded as too informal for peer-reviewed publications in academic journals, this kind of autoethnography has come into vogue, appearing in ever-increasing publications across the disciplines. A third strategy for crafting a hook is to begin with concepts. For instance, writers can introduce a familiar concept to build common ground, making the more complex argumentation to follow more accessible to readers. Consider this example. In many Baptist history books, Adoniram and Ann Judson are venerated as the first international Baptist missionaries, having served in Southeast Asia as translators and missionaries until their deaths. The Judsons' missiological contributions are myriad, deserving of further study. However, the Judsons were not the first international Baptist missionaries. George Lyle, a former slave in Georgia, had been serving as a missionary to Jamaica long before the Judsons set sail. As you can see, beginning with a familiar concept adds to the potency of the disruption when the writer introduces the problem. This approach only works if the writer keeps the description of the familiar concept brief. One runs the risk of losing the reader's interest if they think they already know everything you are going to say. An alternative would be to begin with the unfamiliar concept. Try this example. Being left behind is a good thing. In Matthew 24 and Luke 17, being left is a sign of God's blessing, not a sign of his judgment. Although the phrase has negative connotations in popular culture and Christian fiction, being left behind in these passages is a display of God's mercy. So why do interpreters understand it negatively? If the unfamiliar concept is understandable without first describing familiar concepts, this approach may be a good option. It certainly grabs the reader's attention. However, if the unfamiliar concept seems too outlandish or irrelevant or complex, readers may be unlikely to read further. Fourth, writers can use statistics as the hook for their essay. Consider this example. National statistics report that 11% of college seniors are proficient writers and only 6% are proficient critical thinkers. Such dismal statistics underscore the importance of extensive writing training in the core curriculum of collegiate programs. Statistics are most effective when used to illustrate a problem or unfamiliar concept. Although statistics are more commonly used as hooks in the sciences, they are often acceptable for essays in the humanities as well. These 4 strategies, quotations, anecdotes, concepts, and statistics, represent the 4 most common approaches to introducing research essays. Which strategy you choose should depend once again on your role as a researcher and the identity of your audience in your particular rhetorical situation. Don't feel restricted to these 4 options. Be creative. Combine these strategies or explore new possibilities that may better serve your particular audience. Thank you for watching this video on crafting a hook or prelude. To continue the series in sequence, look for the next video on the shared context or rhetorical situation. Or if you have questions or would like help on one of these specific introductory elements, please feel free to skip ahead to the corresponding video. Thank you, and keep writing.